So I got sick. I didn't realize, actually in hindsight, I had already been sick, but I didn't recognize those symptoms. So I didn't realize, even though I knew that I was losing weight, I knew that my clothes didn't fit, I didn't identify that as a symptom. I knew that I didn't have as much of an appetite, and I eat a lot. So all of a sudden I wasn't interested in food, that's not typical for me. And so those are the two major first symptoms that I didn't even acknowledge. And then I actually got this weird pain in my neck and shoulder, and I had shooting pains down my arms. And I went to urgent care, and it was Christmas Eve, and they said, "Oh, let's do all these tests." They thought it was my heart, 'cause of course it was shooting down my arms. And everything came back clean. And they did a chest x-ray, came back clean. Even though we now know that I had cancer, and with a chest x-ray, it would have picked it up, but it didn't. So they gave me a different diagnosis, and I went on my way. And for about 6 to 8 weeks, I had this pain in my chest. I had to sleep sitting up, so uncomfortable. But I had a diagnosis, so I thought it was going to pass. And it sort of did. And then I felt better, and I actually had a ton of energy. I was like, I would say I felt the best that I had felt in my life right before I then got really sick. And then I got a fever. And so I went to see the doctor, and they said, hopefully it's mono. Let's hope it's mono. And if it's not mono, then we'll send you for a biopsy. But let's just hope it's mono. So they did a bunch of blood work. Everything came back negative for mono, negative for everything. But, wait and see. Of course, didn't go away. And then I started amplifying with symptoms. I got night sweats. I was itchy with a weird rash that would appear and disappear. I had breathlessness. I was starting to cough. And in the end, I actually couldn't catch my breath. I would gasp for air. It was really intense. That was the scariest thing. So finally went and had a biopsy. I had an FNA, a fine needle aspiration of the lymph node over here, which I had never had an FNA. It was really an intense experience. I remember having my head had to be turned a certain way, and it wasn't just one needle poke. It was 5, 6, 7, I don't even remember. So scary thinking about a needle going in to your neck. And luckily my sister was there with me, and it took a week. Took a week and a week, is that true? I can't quite remember now. Oh yeah, it took just less than a week. I did the biopsy on a Thursday, and it took until the following Wednesday to get the results, and it was unbearable. I mean, that wait was awful. And I know why it takes that long, but that's pretty painful to wait. I got the call from my primary doctor, who I don't know very well, and she called and said, "We got the results of your FNA, and it's lymphoma." And I just burst into tears, and I thought of a few questions to ask in the moment, but was just pretty overwhelmed, of course. And I hadn't looked online. I actually had looked, when I first had some symptoms, I had looked at what these symptoms could be, and I saw that really the only two options were mono and lymphoma. And I stopped. I let go of looking online, and I protected myself, and I'm really glad I did that. So when I was diagnosed, I didn't really know much. I didn't really know what lymphoma was. I didn't know what a blood cancer was. I knew the concept of lymphoma and leukemia just in words, not in actual practice. That started the roller coaster ride. That was the launch into the doctor's appointments and all the attempts to gain information and the complications and just everything that I didn't expect to come in those first few weeks. Because there's a part, I don't know if this is true for other people, there's a part of me that felt like, is this the right choice? Is this gonna save me? Is this actually, should I be questioning this? Because there was so much to question about the process, but I never questioned the chemo, even though I'm pretty strongly alternative in terms of alternative medicine. I don't typically go down the kind of traditional Western medicine path, and yet cancer, chemo, let's do this. I just, whatever they tell me, whatever's the right chemo, okay, you just tell me what to do. And I questioned everything else, but that I did not. That was just just take whatever they tell you, this is the poison of choice. Okay, got it. I was getting so sick and I wasn't oxygenating and all these things. And so they needed to give me a round of chemo to start. So before we even had the full diagnosis, they gave me 2 what they called baby doses, awful baby doses of Cytoxan, which is really kind of an evil chemotherapy. Very harsh, very old, makes your hair fall out immediately. And yeah, so they gave me that, and then we found out what my diagnosis was, and then I did a full round of what my treatment would be, which was 6 cycles of dose-adjusted R-EPOCH. I did it as an inpatient, and so I would check into the hospital, and I would do approximately 6 days of the continuous infusions around the clock. So the rituximab for the R, I would start with that, and then the 4 bags of EPOCH, 4 24-hour bags, and then the final day would be Cytoxan, which we would clear out as quickly as possible because it can affect your bladder, and tons of fluids throughout. So 6 cycles of that in the hospital. Okay, so the R-EPOCH chemotherapy is a 21-day cycle. So approximately 6 days that I would be in the hospital. Sometimes it was longer if I had a complication, but approximately 6 days. So during those 6 days, I would get hooked up, and I would be hooked up continuously except for when they would switch the bag. So for that time, I was totally connected to the IV line. But they would encourage me to get up and walk. The more you move, the better the chemo moves through you, the faster it moves out of you. So that was key. And then I would get home, and I would have a few days where I would feel kind of loopy from all the chemo. I would just feel like really nauseous, but just kind of, lightheaded, I guess, loopy. And then I would become neutropenic, which is when my white blood cells would drop, and I would just be exhausted. So I would usually, pretty much every round, I got some quantity of mouth sores, and sometimes it would just be a few, and I was sort of okay, but mostly once I got to round 4, it was awful. Luckily, round 4, I was in the hospital when that happened because they were monitoring my heart, and I could not function. I was miserable. I don't know how many mouth sores I had because I could not open my mouth even a tiny bit. The doctor wanted to look at it, and that was the only time I would open my mouth. I was on a morphine pump. I was on pediatric oxycodone, which is liquid. I was on round-the-clock Tylenol. I was on everything you could imagine. And I'm a tiny person, and I'm very reactive to things. And I was just, I don't like hard drugs, but wow, those mouth sores. Yes. So that was usually pretty miserable. And if I wasn't in the hospital, then I was laying on the couch. I was miserable for a few days. I had no energy. All I could do was make myself eat and drink. And then I would start to rebound. The white blood cell count would go up. Maybe I would get a, blood transfusion. The words escape me, which is kind of amazing. I think I had 3 or 4. I can't quite remember. They're amazing. I was terrified. I was totally terrified. Of course, blood, someone else's blood going into your body. It looks crazy going in your IV. But best thing ever, I would feel like $1 million like 24 hours later. I actually had energy. Same thing with getting fluids. So if you're worried about that, it's not as scary as it seems. It's actually such a blessing. So sometimes I would get a little extra something, to get me through. And honestly, a lot of what happened in that cycle was checking in with my oncologist. So I went in twice a week on those 2 weeks that I was home. So in the hospital for 1 week, home for 2 weeks, but going in at least twice a week to check in. So there was always something to do or to monitor. And then by the end of the cycle, like maybe 3-4 days before, I'd start feeling better. I'd start to get more energy. I'd be like, oh my God, I want to do something. I want to go out. I want to go for a walk, which was amazing. And I would usually, I wasn't driving, so I would just start walking. I didn't feel safe driving. So I would just walk here in my house and out on my deck and get a little sunshine. And I just could do more, like, I'll do a little laundry, little things. Maybe I would wash a dish or something. I could figure out the rhythm. I knew what was coming each cycle once I had a few under my belt, but they were pretty extreme. Like, it wasn't like, oh, I can do this. It was, oh, okay, I have to do this. I can do this. it's going to be hard. So honestly, I shut down in that first cycle. I think I was so scared of chemotherapy, and I was so scared of, I don't know if I was scared of dying, but I was so scared of the experience that I really checked out. Like, I think for just like the emotional safety of that moment, I shut down. And Jess really, really was scared that I was going to shut down for the whole process. I know she talked to some of my family about it, was really afraid for me. And what I realized is that after my first cycle, I came to. And that moment of, okay, I can now take a breath and I can grieve this. I just cried. So I'm grateful though that I wouldn't change it. Like if I could go back, it's not like I would, say to myself, like, you need to feel during this first round. I think that was exactly what I needed to do to get through such a scary moment, like the acute scary moment, to then be able to have enough energy, enough emotional energy especially, to move through all that was going to come. Not only the chemo, but all the side effects and all the other problems that I ended up having. Nausea was different round to round. The first thing was, I think constipation was the biggest one. Oh man, something we don't want to talk about, but we have to talk about it because figuring out how to manage my digestive system was probably the hardest part about chemo. Once I figured that out, I was good. I figured it out, but I went through some pretty terrible experiences to get there. So that was a thing that my doctor really didn't know how to guide me on. I found that the suggestions from the nurses and the doctors did not work for me, and I needed something gentler. And finally my oncologist suggested just a different option, but it took a while to get there. The nausea came and went. I think it's funny, I almost can't remember fully, but it increased with each round. So I know by the end I was taking round the clock Zoloft. I would set a timer, and I actually ended up not doing it the normal every 8 hours, but we split it into 4-hour doses, which was very rare. And I would do that. And I took the Zoloft all through treatment, and probably for, 3 months afterwards, because that nausea just lingered on. I think I was also terrified to go off of it because I was so nauseous, and nausea's bad. Nausea is one of the worst symptoms. It's just, it makes you feel terrible. It made me feel like I couldn't function, and you don't want to eat, and yeah. So I tried some other drugs when the Zoloft wasn't enough, and it was never enough, but some drugs worked, some drugs definitely did not work. Some drugs made me feel worse. And we ended up giving me more and more and more of the anti-nausea drugs. In the last 2 cycles, it just didn't work. I was just nauseous. I just kind of had to accept that. I did a lot of laying around in those moments, and I also did a lot of distracting. So I was a big fan of, especially, it started when I was symptomatic in the beginning and I was having these coughing fits. And Jess would just suggest that I turn on a television show. I'm not a big TV watcher, but man, I needed TV. Like, I needed something to fixate on so that I could stop thinking about my body, and TV really helped. And I could do, a show, something small, and then take a break because my brain couldn't really follow for that long, and then go back to it. So that was really key for me with nausea, to just try to distract or pace around the house, or just something to change the moment. So I kept some hair, and then it kind of went, slowly went away through the cycles, and then my eyelashes and my eyebrows went, and that was so hard. That changed everything. I didn't look like myself anymore, and I remember I would get up in the middle of the night and I would go to the bathroom because of all the fluids. So I would go to the bathroom and I would catch myself. Every time I would catch myself in the mirror, and I was startled. Every time. Like, you would think, day after day after day. And there would be, because I was half asleep, right? I wasn't remembering. And even when I would go in there and remember, like during the daytime, I still would look at myself and just feel this overwhelm of, that's not you. Like, that is not Arielle. That is someone else. And I think that, like I said, for me, the hair was just a piece of the puzzle. And so I could kind of acclimate to my whole body not feeling like me. My skin didn't feel like me. Like everything, every part of me felt foreign. And I think if my hair had been the same, that might have been an even more bizarre experience. But somehow the whole thing didn't match. And I would joke that I looked cancery. I use that term, like, oh, I look so cancery, or, can't you tell when I'm out in public? Or someone would come see me and say, don't I look cancery? Like I would try to, kind of lighten the mood. I don't know. But it was a match. Like I looked like I felt. And so for me, I just had to let go of the vanity because there was nothing about me that felt good. And so, so I didn't have any hair. And I covered my head up. I mean, I definitely wore hats. I was in treatment, I was in treatment from July through October. Yeah, the end of June. Yeah, July through October. And but in San Francisco where it's not warm in the summer. So I was cold, I was thin, I was cold. And so I had just like really kind of simple, cute hats that I found. Almost like ski hats that were comfortable, would hold my head because it was my head would get tender too. As I said, not only when the hair was falling out, but just as it kept falling out. So I wanted something. I didn't want, like, knit was fine in the beginning and then it bothered me. So just finding what works for you. I know some people love scarves. I couldn't figure them out. Just wasn't my style. Yeah, and it was so amazing when my hair started growing back, and I never had super, super short hair. I'd never buzzed my hair or anything, but I thought I looked pretty cute when I had really short hair. And I was sort of like, all of a sudden I felt this new, it wasn't sexy necessarily, but this new confidence maybe, like, I actually look okay. It was not a look I had ever intended, but it was fun. There was some joy in it, right? I mean, joy in the hair coming back just in general, but also joy in the styles. And then, of course, the awkward of how is this going to grow out and what do I do with it? And, there's the growing pains. But I've had my first haircut. This is grown out first haircut. I let it grow. I got the amazing, curly, weird look that just did not have a style, and finally chopped it. And so happy. I think that was actually the biggest shift for me away from feeling like I looked still like I had cancer, even though I'm sure people couldn't tell. But to me, getting a haircut, getting a style meant I was just Arielle. I wasn't cancer Arielle. The thing I did not get from my oncologist was any helpful information on side effects. This is what I've learned, this is my perspective, that oncologists are amazing. They are brilliant. And what they know is chemotherapy. They know treatment. That is what they study. It's what they, what they see day in and day out. It's what they have to care about because it's the treatment, whether it's chemotherapy or immunotherapy or whatever. It's the treatment that's curative. And, not but, and it's the side effects that we are managing that sometimes we can't manage. And to have access to information about what are the possible side effects with each chemo, what can we do, how to advocate for yourself. Like, I started to get neuropathy and I told my oncologist, and she lowered one of the dosages, like one of the chemos within the cocktail, and my neuropathy went away, basically. And I was like, oh my God, like, people don't know to do this. Like, if you just say something and the oncologist can help you, maybe. Sometimes you have to really push. When you have those gut instincts, you have to go with them. You at least have to explore them, is what I learned. Like, you can't, when I have something in my gut that's saying, whoa, 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 hang on a second, voice it. They did not appreciate, doctors did not like how many questions I had. But I asked them anyway because they were critical, and I'm a human being and I get to ask all my questions and take up space. So that's the best advice I can give. Take up space. It's your life. It's not their life. They're not the ones going through the chemotherapy. They know a lot of things, but they're not the one. You know your body.